Money, consumption, status, and power have long driven our culture's pulse. They've shaped our motivations, our behaviors, and our beliefs. But what happens when we give art the same influence? Writers, designers, musicians, photographers, videographers, and the world's most creative minds have the power to heal us, challenge us, and guide us back home to ourselves. In their hands and through their crafts, we find a new world, one where art is a catalyst for powerful change, where self-expression, human connection, and deep empathy are the world's richest assets. This is Art is the New Wall Street, with your host, Morgan Short.
Welcome back to Art is the New Wall Street. I'm your host, Morgan Short, and today I'm joined by St. Paul poet, MC, hip-hop artist, and founder of TruArtSpeaks, Tish Jones. Hey, Tish.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you and to talk about creativity. And actually, where I wanted to start today with you is just tell me when you first considered yourself an artist.
Easy peasy. Back in elementary school. That's, yeah, I mean, it was second or third grade, and our science teacher created an extracurricular space for young folks who got their work done really fast. Um, so it was like this in school, after school opportunity, and she pulled out some theater stuff, and the rest was history. That was it. I was into acting, into theater. As a collective, we didn't do Rapunzel, but she gave me a copy of Rapunzel because that's what I wanted to do. The rest of the group wanted to do murder mystery. We had little banana guns, and the kids thought that was cool.
Did you use the term artist as soon as you, got into theater and, those kinds of things, or did it take a while for you to, label yourself that?
I think it took a while for me to label myself that. I always understood that I was a writer, that I enjoyed theater, that I, wrote poems, etc. So like I understood what I was doing, but conceptualizing myself as an artist, I think it didn't happen until I was a teenager. So 17, 18. Well, I mean, like I'm acting like when I was 8 years old, I was I'm like, yeah. And then when I was a teenager, yeah. So that's kind of 10 years later. I
Yeah.
was like, but yeah, when I was a teenager, that's when I and it really it I was specific. I was a poet, right? That's what it was, and I knew I was an artist, but I really knew I love poetry, right? I see the world as a poet. That's what solidified for me, and that meant I was also an artist. But there are ways that musicians see the world. There are ways that engineers see the world, and you can be a scientist, but an engineer, it's a different bag. You can be an artist, but a poet, it's a different bag.
Mhm. Tell me a little bit more about how you see the world through poetry.
Poets are sensitive, and on top of that, I'm an Aries, so I'm doubly sensitive. But so I'm like a ram poet. But poets, that sensitivity thing is real. Our whole job is to metabolize what we see and experience and translate, transmute, inspire, transform, right, into language and something digestible for other people who engage with our work. So it means taking, combing over the world with this lens and this brush to find the fine details. It means slowing down often. It means asking more questions perhaps than the other folk. It means paying attention to detail, using our five senses like very intentionally. There are a lot of things. And I have to double click on the sensitivity thing. I think we are really an emotional bunch.
Mhm. Mhm. I write I write a little bit of poetry. I don't do spoken word or anything. I have a published poetry book, but I certainly resonate with that. I am the emotional one in my family. Sometimes I feel like too much. I just break down crying in conversations sometimes, so I feel that for sure.
Yeah, it's all of it too. I work a lot with Kyle Trent, Myri, Guante, and I remember way, way, way back in the day, probably at this point, 15, honestly, maybe even 20 years ago, he had this moniker. It was like, "Why is Guante so angry?" And like the sensitivity can show up in many different ways. You know what I mean? In terms of how we express that sensitivity, and I really appreciated that because I know that he's just sensitive to what is happening in the world and to like equity and you know yeah, education and all the things, but y you are emotionally moved when you move through the world as a poet.
Is there a specific energy that you feel that you write most often, like, towards? Like, example, there's the 4 energies, I can't remember who it's from, but it's like, dissed, blessed, pissed, etcetera. Like, is there a type of energy that you feel like you get the most creativity out of?
I think I don't know if it fits in those 4 categories, but I think I'm analytical and inquisitive. I think a
Oh,
lot of my
interesting
writing.
place. Yeah. Interesting
Yeah,
place to have the emotions come out, like, analytically. That's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah, I think that's what it is, really reflective in the analysis when I think of all of my work. Yep, that's it.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of being an Aries, there is a ton of, like, planets in Aries I heard right now from
Yeah,
astrologers.
big energy.
It's gonna be an interesting time this week,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's a new moon situation, I think, this weekend, so, I was told to just, like, sit back and observe and not get too into the energy, but as an Aries, I'm sure you're gonna feel some interesting things.
Oh, I'm already feeling it.
Are you?
Oh my goodness, it's emotion. It's emotion already. Yeah,
Uh-huh. You know,
but I
we
love
are
it.
m yeah, you love it, you love it.
I love it. Yeah,
Mhm,
I'm an Aries. I sit in it.
mhm. I'm a Scorpio, so we go to the depths. So, speaking of, like, the energy we're in, we are moving through a lot right now collectively the last few years. What are you feeling right now as a human and as an artist, and what does it mean to hold space for the communities that you serve?
My goodness, there are so many different communities that it means many different things at many different times, right? And the last 6 years in Minnesota have been quite tumultuous, and different communities have been targeted at different times, right? And the same community has been targeted too, like, right? So if we think geographically, it's this. If we think, busted down by whatever demographic, and it just has changed over the last few years, right? When I think about nuances of how I was showing up for community in 2020, there are these obviously, right, like showing up in support of the Black community in the Twin Cities was, but then also peeling back the layers of the systemic violence. It was like there was also a lot of caretaking and work for elders, that many folk don't talk about. It's not a part of, a public or dominant narrative, but that was so much of the work because the government shut down transportation. So it meant that like certain elders couldn't get access to their medication, right? So there was a lot of organizing around making sure folks had what they needed to actually live and to live well, right? And with dignity still. And then, on the flip side of that, fast forward to 2026, and I can still see the impact of 2020 on the kids, like on grade school kids who are now teenagers who are trying to figure out how to be social because they were on lockdown and they were doing virtual learning and they weren't being socialized,
Mhm.
in what we would consider a normative way, right? So, yeah, I mean, how do I feel? I feel like I'm all and obviously in a contemporary sense, right? Metro surge and again, all of the communities, right? Working with, you know, migrant communities, there's safety. How safe do you feel leaving your home? Okay, you are leaving your home. What are the things that we need to think about? Rent support, just everything. So I feel something different every day, maybe is a good way to say it. Because on some days I feel energized, on some days I feel exhausted, on some days I feel so deeply inspired by what we're doing and how we're
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah.
On other days, I feel like we are, that the wool is sometimes being pulled over our eyes and it's easy
Hmm.
to do some things and we could make harder decisions. Or that sort of analytical piece comes up. I feel as a writer, there's also conflict. I think that there was a moment where it was like, write about it. All the poets. I want give me a poem about Metro Surge. What's it like to be in Minnesota right now? Where's this poem? And I don't know that I buy into like that sort of disaster production currency thing. I kn There is, like, we need to make sense of it, and writers do that well, and poets do that well, and it does help translate what's happening for everyone else and, like,
Uh-huh.
transmute the experience, and I also know, and I think this is again, a critique of the system, right, that then attention shifted, and we're still dealing with, it still needs to be a part of the narrative strategy, um, and we are left doing that work. But the machine is less interested right now, which doesn't help us. So there's conflict. I feel conflicted. I feel inspired. I feel grateful for opportunities. I'm glad that we were able to, inspire the nation and world and tell stories. And I'm also, the work doesn't end when the cameras turn off.
Mm-mm. And we have to figure out, like, who we are, and sometimes, like, especially for me, I know that I should like, I feel like I should be doing art. I feel like I should be, finding outlets and, stepping up, and I just feel paralyzed at the same time. Like,
Yeah, it's hard.
it and it's hard because I don't always wanna go into it, the processing, and then I like, stay away from the outlets, so, ugh, anyway,
No, I
yeah,
get it.
you summed that up pretty beautifully also. It's a really hard thing to explain right now, just how we're feeling, and the question, "How are you?" is actually so loaded, like, I keep just saying, "Yeah, the horrors persist.
Yeah,
Horrors
absolutely.
persist, and so do I." Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there are still friends, artists and poets. I ran into someone last week actually. I haven't seen her since November, and she confirmed it. She's like, I haven't left my house since November.
oh my
This is like
gosh, yeah.
the first week of me being outside, and she's a brilliant artist. And I'm like, yo, where are you? And it's like, yeah, no, I've been in the house. And it's that, and and then my inclination, which I'm trying to, navigate and figure out, I always want to do something. So I'm like, oh man, how do we, and then there's also dominant narrative stuff, there are so many communities that have been targeted by ICE. But when we think about it, or when it's talked about, we mention one group of people, maybe two, and
Mhm,
you know, we're such a diverse state, and the metro area is so diverse that there are so many people who have been in hiding and in fear and targeted and attacked, and that to me is like where the real sort of power of the arts is like how do
mhm,
we tell those stories is really what I'm interested in. How do we talk about who is feeling this? How do we bring communities who have been at the margins of this experience, even though they've been centered as targets, right? But who have been at the margin of sort of the common story and common narrative. How do we center those folks and like really like resource and care for them too? Um, yeah. big on my big on my heart.
Are there artists or organizations that come to mind that do a really good job of that?
Absolutely. I mean, every organization that has been doing this work has been in Minnesota. MIRAC. And even arts serving organizations, places like Springboard for the Arts. There are tons of organizations who are doing the good work.
Mhm.
I'm a writer, right? So I'm always thinking about narrative strategy. I'm like, how do we not who's doing the work of keeping us safe? Because we got that. Like Minnesota's done a really good job of looking out for their folk, right?
Mhm.
Of taking care of each other. But how do we, as we tell this broader story of Metro Surge in the Twin Cities, in Minnesota and beyond, how do we say, yes, it targeted, you know, uh, Latinx folks. Yes, there was you know, this narrative of fraud that really pointed attention toward the Somali community. And also, like, can we talk about the Eritrean community? Can we talk about the East African community? Can we talk about the West African community? Can we talk about the Asian community? Like, all of these other communities have been targeted too. And, like, how do we talk about the impacts on folk who have made home here,
Yeah.
right? Who have been invited to make home
Mm.
here. All of the folks who have been invited to make home here, because they have all been impacted, right? Um, and I think that's really important, because as we start talking about it's all of us and the neighbor thing, these folks fall under that umbrella too, and I just think it's important to lift up those stories as well.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Mhm.
And speaking of all these communities, you are celebrating 20 years of True Art Speaks. Congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So can you walk us through the origin? What were you sensing when you founded this in 2006? And just tell us a little bit more about the mission as well.
Yeah, so the mission of True Art Speaks is to cultivate literacy, leadership, and social justice through the study and application of spoken word and hip hop culture. So, one, I'm a poet, I'm an MC, I'm a hip hop theater artist. Yes, some of it was very selfish trying to make space for myself and also for my colleagues and my comrades. When we first started, we were very like guerrilla theater, street theater, hip hop theater,
Mhm.
um, organizer activists, speaking to different things that were going on in our community, creating art and sharing art in very, very public spaces and on our own dime just to address the issues, right? We were socially conscious artists, in all mediums of hip hop. That's how we began. We just began as a collective of artists trying to do good work together. We didn't formalize into a nonprofit until 6 years later. We were like, "Oh," and
Mhm.
it wasn't because that's the route we wanted to go. It was actually there was a group of young people who approached us, and they were like, "Man, you have all these connections. There's this thing that we really wanna do." It was the Brave New Voices International Youth Poetry Slam Festival. They really wanted to attend that festival, and the entity that had been responsible for, you know, taking a delegation from Minnesota, they weren't taking them anymore. Sunset their role in that. So they came to us and they're like, "Hey, you go down there every year and you work with, James and, Youth Speaks, and can you help us?" And so that pivoted our work into the realm of nonprofit because, how do you what's the structure that allows you to safely engage with young people, do youth development, da 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 da, da, right? So our journey has always been about creative expression, civic engagement, right, for artists, and then these young folks were like, "Hey, can you support us?" So then, we folded that in too, right?
Prior to the nonprofit back in 2006, you mentioned, some of the early issues. I wanna dig into those. Tell
Yeah.
me
So
tell me about, like, the very origin and, like, what was on your mind? What was going on during that time? Um, what did you see a need for?
absolutely, in 2006, there were three things that really that were the impetus for starting this organization. I'll start with the positive things, the inspiring things, right?
Yeah.
So one, in 2005, two things happened. One was I went to Brave New Voices International Youth Poetry Slam Festival, and it is an international festival that in its prime convened 600 young people between the ages of 13 and 19 years old in a different state or city every year, along with their mentors. And it's a week-long poetry festival. The young people would share their poems. I was a young poet in 2005, a young teen poet representing Minnesota in that space. And that was, one of the three components where I'm like, oh, people want to hear young people. It's people want to
Yeah.
hear people my age, my
Mhm.
people my age from all over the world, from Leeds, from Trinidad, from South Africa, LA, Chicago. We're all trying to speak to what we're experiencing in our communities. We're all trying to be heard by people in positions of power to make our experiences better, or to understand and navigate what a global or local or state experience or situation might be. It's really empowering. And as a student of hip hop, also we were able to meet some of our greats, in that experience. And as a student of poetry, we were able to meet some of our greats. I met through that experience, I met Amiri Baraka, I met Sonia Sanchez, I met, you know, Queen Latifah, like all these people, Most Def, all these folks who I had grew up either reading or listening to or studying or appreciating as, figures in Black culture, spoken word and hip hop. I was able to break bread with them and learn from them, right? So that was one. And then two, here in Minnesota, which I think is where, was really inspiring. Same year, 2005, there was the B Girl B summit. It's the first international summit of women in hip hop, and it happened here, right? And it was twofold because, again, I was in this really privileged position and able to meet the founders, and I was able to work with some of the founders like very intimately. Um, but it was like, "Oh, okay, so there's a space in Minnesota. Like, you can be a woman, you can be a leader, you can make space for yourself, for other women, for other people." Minnesota supports, these affinity-based spaces and these arts-based spaces. Minnesota has a rich hip hop culture, and Minnesota can bring people from all around the world together.
Mhm.
The greats in hip hop, the Roxanne, Shante, Medusa, whatever, whatever, right? Um, so that was really inspiring. And like I was still digging for like a consistent space for young people, right? And then the sort of tertiary thing was here in Minnesota, I should say. The tertiary thing was I had a job in 2026 that one in 2026, Minneapolis had the third highest murder rate per capita by August of that year.
Mhm.
Um, And one of the tenets of my job was that every time someone was murdered in North Minneapolis, um, I was I was supposed to speak with the survivors of this person, share a poem at their vigil, and that was a really, really, really hard thing to do. And I was still a teenager, um, and
Wow.
And by the time August came, it was too much, and I stopped doing that service and was like, instead, I'd like to organize, a protest, like and ask the community, politicians, leaders, artists, educators, business owners, etc., to show up in solidarity, and in their positions and just as symbols, right? That everyone knows this person's face or that person's face, and they hold this position, like, in solidarity against the violence that's happening, right? I don't wanna stand, I don't know, and I knew some of the young men who had been murdered that year. It was just really difficult, and so that for me was my first public sort of social justice-based organizing
Mhm.
effort where I tapped on the folk in my artist community and bridged like my civic engagement mind because the space that I was working at, it was a civic based organization, and I'm like, yeah, there's something here. There's
Mhm.
something really powerful about the artists connecting with and working with, political leaders and community leaders. And I mean, it was a really powerful event. And so what was happening over the course of 2025 or excuse me, 2005 and 2006 was me sort of trying to think about where can young people be from safe to express themselves, safe to convene, and how can we grow into adult artists and leaders? Like, what does that space look like in Minnesota? Where can it be consistent and not just a platform to share? Because we had that. We had a billion spaces where we could just get on stage and do our thing, but where do hip hop artists get to practice together, get to learn together, get to play together?
Mhm.
Where do, spoken word artists specifically not, because the loft has always been dope and it's like it's a writer space, but where do the spoken word artists get to consistently go, get to learn, etc. So True Art Speaks was really me trying to find that space and then also think about safety for young people, safety from sexual predators, from financial predators, and somewhere to put that energy.
I wanted to ask you about that part is, like, why youth specifically, and what kinds of things we really need to protect, young artists from. And I think you've spoken about that before, but I'd love to dig into that a little more.
Yeah. So I have to be really careful because a safe space for youth was and is really important.
Mhm.
Um, but that's not like I said, the origins of us, I mean, I was a teenager, but when I started it, which is a wild thing to think about, but my collaborators were not all teenagers, right? So it has always been this multi-generational space for artists. And but when doing that, right, and that's where the specific attention to young people is paid, because if you are gonna have a multi-generational space, it is important that the young people in the space are safe, right?
Mhm.
And, I was just talking about this the other day. Africa Bambaataa just died, and he is, championed as one of the founders of hip hop. He also was a sexual predator. Right? So and that came out, within the last decade or so. It sort of erupted, and it's been, are always those underground whispers and looks about like,
Yeah.
but it came to the surface in a really big way in the last decade. And that, like, what are the systems that we can put in place when we have multi-generational spaces, when we have just youth only spaces, but we have adult mentors? What are, to the best of our ability, how can we protect young
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
um, from sexual predators? How do we create systems and metrics and policies to think about equity and pay? How do we define certain things? How do we look at certain things? I was a victim as a young person of being mentored by folk who, it was enough for them to throw me $50 after I had been on stage for an hour. Um, but the check they received was,
Astronomical.
25 times that, or you know what I mean? Like, and financial literacy is important, and also these 14-year-old, you know what I mean? It's just like,
Mhm.
what are the systems? How are we transparent about what folks are getting into, about those are the things that I was really thinking about, and then also stewardship with career, with platform and opportunity. How do we ensure that people are safe from predatory marketing? How do we ensure that you know performances, like if a young person is invited to perform at someone's event, how do we ensure that if they capture that event, they're not making money off of that, the audio feed of that, just all these little things that an emerging artist or a hobbyist, as like Minnesotans say, um, isn't being taken advantage of before they really get into their career and understand all of the ins and outs of what it means to be a professional artist.
To have been, what, 18 And you must have had so much drive. Like, where did you get all of this?
I'm a
Like
hustler, baby. I just want you to know. Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for saying that. I wish I knew the answer to that question. That's a really good question, and I I wanted something for myself and my peers and my community. I had really fantastic mentors. Yeah, I think I've been trying to build this thing that's like where what could be the consistent space for people. Like we were just talking about one of our longest running programs is an open mic, which is now the longest running open mic in the Twin Cities. And
Congratulations.
thank you. But it's weekly, right? And it's been weekly since it started. And that's no small feat. Like it's no small feat it's like a job. It's like you got to go to work every day. I know I know I'm not the only person that wakes up some days and is like, I don't feel like it, but you have to do it. It's the same thing with this creative space, to go to run an open mic where you have to hold space for other people. And then it's creative stories. There's people who use their art form as a means of healing. There's sometimes triggering content that comes up. There's sometimes, there's all these personalities of people you may not know at all. And every week it could be a different set of people. You don't know. But that for over a decade, I think that was that's a manifestation of the dream, right? It's one here is a consistent space. It will be here. You don't have to worry about reverb. Reverb will be here. You can move, and to LA and pursue whatever you're gonna pursue, and then come back to Minnesota and reverb is still there, right? And TruArtSpeaks is still hosting it and holding it. So the family, the community that you grew with, have grown with, great. Or the inverse of that, or another viewpoint is like this is for many people, Reverb was their first space.
Mhm.
Like I think about or one of their first spaces. I think about folks like Dua Salah. Dua used to come to Reverb all the time, right? And has mentioned Reverb in many articles in public spaces and is now doing amazing things, touring, you know, in film, etc. Um, but it's these kind of spaces that are entryway spaces into what your career can be.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I've always just wanted that. I've always wanted spaces that are intergenerational because I understand the power of intergenerational play and exploration and exchange. I've always wanted us to have something consistent. I've always wanted us to have multidisciplinary spaces because we're multifaceted people. Um, so, I don't know. I was just like, I want it, let's do it. I want to see it.
What can happen? What can happen when you bring intergenerational communities together? What's the power of it?
You know how much time is saved? I mean, as a black woman and hip hop culture, it's black culture. Um, when I think of spoken word, I think of Gil Scott Heron, I think of Sonia Sanchez, I think of Amiri Baraka, I think of Etheridge Knight, I think of the last poets, right? Like, and as a black woman, the role of elders, right? And within black culture, the
Mhm.
role of elders is so important, right? They don't just teach us about, who we were. They they are wise enough to help us figure out also who we are, and who we can be sometimes before we can figure it out for ourselves. And there's a way in which, as a historically disenfranchised group of folk, there's also a navigation that these folks can provide. So eldership is really critical, and eldership across ethnicity, right? Across ethnic lines. Like we work really closely with David Murrah. He's an elder um, in our writing community that comes
Yeah.
in to work with our folks. So it's not just about Black community, but it's about the principle within Black culture of valuing eldership for tutelage, for experience, and then vice versa, right? Because like we are responsible we're responsible for one another. We just are, right? So these young people also need to know who our elders are, right? And to feel a sense of belonging and kinship with them as they age and transition, right? And like, what does it mean to be in relationship in that way, and to develop a broader sense of community? Um, the village concept is that your kin expand outside of your bloodline. That's how you remain well. So this intergenerational piece is about emotional wellness. It's about cultural wellness and intelligence. It's about cultural preservation, um, and it's also about like direct education within one's art form, or capital L literacy.
It's just so great to, like, hear your perspectives on all of this, and also you're making me wanna go call my grandma. Like, we need to have more conversations and also, like, show up in community the way that you are describing. What's something that you would tell your, younger 18-year-old self now?
I would say way to not listen. Way to not listen. It's really, really funny that you say that, that you mention your grandma. I I love my grandma down. That is my lady. Love her down. Both of my grandmothers. One has passed, and I mean I love them down. And my grandmother, we just had a Marcom situation at TruArtSpeaks the other day, and my grandma did like an impromptu stop by and participated because she's just like, "Oh, I'm in the area. I'm by the office." I'm like, "Oh, come by. Here's what we're doing,"
Mhm.
and then she ended up getting on film in this whole thing. And ironically, even though she's like my biggest fan, it was the first time she's ever done anything on film for TruArtSpeaks. First time ever, and she goes to all. She's a rah rah sis boom bow. She's like that person. But that was a really unique moment, and also, and again, right, like this is why I'm like way to not listen, because I do remember being a young person, and my grandma's always like, maybe one day you're gonna be a college professor. You're gonna, you're gonna. So in the earliest days, and again, I get it, because I know she's gonna see this and be like, why do you say that? You have to. But and even I mentioned it to one of my colleagues, and they're like, "I can never even imagine or hear your grandma saying anything like that. What?" But early on, she was like, "Okay, are you gonna go get a job? Are you gonna work?" And I'm like, "I'm headed to DC. I'm gonna do this National Hip Hop Theater Festival real quick, and then I'll be back though. But no, I'm just gonna go do my one woman show out here real
Mhm.
quick." And at 20 years old, and she didn't understand. And it's also like the culture, like spoken word was growing in popularity at the time in which I was growing up, and it was, anyway. So yeah, I would tell my younger self way to not listen, way to trust yourself, and way to still be respectful of folk who didn't understand, and to bring folks with you to trust your vision and your dream.
You've struck a chord. You've struck a chord with this story about your grandma. This is a big reason why I even started this show specifically. Just the inherited narratives we get from the generations before us, the pressures to go in a practical path, like, "Oh, how are you gonna make money through art?" And then you even have, like, the starving artist, like, the uh, you know, it's a stereotype, but, like, my parents really pressured me hard as well, and they listen to my mom listens to every episode, so she'll hear this too. Pressured me really hard to, think about how I was going to, like, build independence and take that more practical route, and I think for a lot of artists, like, you have those early champions, and then you have the loud, like, negators, the loud detractors that are like, "Eh, is this
Mhm.
really a practical route?" So I love that you said, "I'm good on you for not listening because I listened, and, um, I sometimes it feels, and I know this isn't true, like this isn't the truth for me, but sometimes it feels like I'm too late. Like, but I know that's not the truth. I know I can make art anytime, but that's just a feeling, like I wish I would have been doing this. I wish I would have centered my life more around this instead of centering the career at the center of my identity, which is something I've been unlearning in my 30s. Oh yeah, career doesn't have to be at the center of my identity.
It's so complex. First of all, yes, yes, affirming that you can do whatever you want whenever you want. It's not too late. And I mean, we also all have those, we're human, yo. Like we all have those moments where it's like, should I have, you know, made it on a down year or whatever. I'm like, man, do I want to go be a professor at the, cuz I
Right.
love teaching too. There's also
Yeah.
like your skill set, what you're good at, what you're,
Mhm.
like all the things. So it happens, and it is so difficult to go against the grain. This is, to be an artist is to also um be rebellious, right? And be steadfast in your thing. And it's not easy to do in a capitalist society because we have to eat.
Yes, we
we
do.
we you know what I mean? Like we need, and that, I mean, and also that's what the like arts activists are fighting for, right? Like because we need we have basic needs: food, shelter, sleep, and those narratives that require us or encourage us to go with the grain and participate in the system, um, the way that our parents and grandparents and great grandparents had to. They thrive on the fear of not having basic needs met, and capitalism will make you think you got to do some things. Makes you think you need more than you do. It's all the things we have to unlearn.
Yeah. Even our relationship to money itself, like, do I really need all this stuff behind me? Like, it looks pretty, but although books, yes.
I was just gonna say I'm gonna fight for a
I will
book now.
yes,
Don't
same.
don't give me look.
The
I'll
books.
fight
The
for a
books
book,
I do
okay?
need,
Yes, we do.
and I want to fill my walls with art, especially local artists. But yes, yes to everything you just said. That is the literal heartbeat of this show. Um, I get so angry at capitalism sometimes because I just feel like I went down this path, but I'm glad I'm here
I'm so glad you're here.
because 5 years are gonna pass, and then, 5 years would have just passed instead of me, changing and finding a new path now?
Good for you also.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Way to be brave.
Thanks. And I love inviting guests on who have been brave before me and have forged a path so that I've always kind of like thought about it as like look for people that have what you want and then learn from them. I knew a couple years ago that I wanted to be around really cool people doing important work that were focused on creativity, and so created the container for that, and I think that's how we do it. How
That's
we
what's up.
how we do it. Let's talk a little bit about your, like, creative practice yourself, like, your day to day, what's going on. Um, what kind of, like, creative routines do you have or, like, what do you do when you're stuck? How do you reach flow state? All of the things.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. I really Patricia Smith, who's one of the goats in this writing thing, she just did an interview recently, and she said what I would say, which is like there's people ask that question, specifically like the routine thing,
Mhm,
or do you write at a certain time and
mhm.
that whole thing. And it's like, yeah, I try to write every day when the sun comes up. I wake up at 6 a.m. And it's like the thing is that so especially for me as an arts administrator too, and as someone who does a lot of civic engagement, it's so unrealistic to try to set a time. Um and there are a lot of conversations about, if you if you do that, then your creativity will know to come and meet you there. And I think that could be true. I don't know because it doesn't work for me. But what does work for me is always receiving the creative spark when it goes aflame, right? Always. So if I'm mid conversation and I have to excuse myself to like write something down, or if it looks like I'm zoning out, I'm writing in my head. I'm old school like that. I write on napkins and paper towels and old envelopes and my hand and my arm and whatever I can get my hands on when the inspiration comes. Because to me, that's like how I have always respected, my creative energy, right? By just meeting it at the door always. Um, and yeah, routine wise, like I'm a reader. I read and I get inspired by what I read. I like to I go to other people's events. I listen to other artists, new artists I've never met, try to see like, just what I want to be in conversation with my peers. I want to be in conversation with my contemporaries. I want to be in conversation with the past. So when or if I don't feel like in recent years have been stuck. I think I used to get stuck when I wanted to write every day and when I like put that kind of rigor on myself.
Yes.
That's when I felt more stuck. But when I am just in practice and like just reading a thing or just listening to someone else's poems or going to a concert, the door is open.
When that inspiration strikes, do you think it's coming from something bigger than yourself?
Absolutely. All the time. Always has, always will. Absolutely.
You see yourself as a channel or a vessel that the creativity flows through, or what's kind of your philosophy, or how do you see it?
Yeah, I think yeah, I think my ancestors guide every single thing that I do. And I think my job is just to honor that and to show up and answer the call.
Yummy. I love that stuff. I love it. That's yeah, I'm in agreement, for sure. I think it's a creativity is a divine gift, and we are we are the vessels through which it flows. We are reaching time, so I always like to ask if there's anything you'd like to share live, if there's anything you'd like to plug that's coming up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, it is True Art Speaks is celebrating 20 years as an organization, and there are two things that we're doing to celebrate our 20 years. The first I'll talk about is we have this little punch card.
Oh,
It's
cool.
really awesome. It's like one of those coffee cards, where, you buy 9 coffees, get your 10th one free. Except this one, there are 20 for-profit businesses that we have partnered with over the last 20 years, and each of them are, um, providing a one-time single-seat 20% discount on your total bill. Just pop in. So our website has the full list of all these places. There's an auto repair shop. There are record stores. There are bookstores. There are breweries. There are restaurants. There are, you know, record store. All the things. So it's a very, very print shops. It's a very diverse group of folks. But these are the folks who have also powered our work for the last 20 years, and they're celebrating it with us. So very, very thankful for that. You can order it on the website. It mails ships out to you within 2 weeks and all those good things. It is a fundraising tool for the organization. Like we have all agreed that that's what it is. So the price
Mm.
point is a fundraising price point. Um, but that's been really fun. And the other thing is, it's a celebration, y'all. So every third weekend of the month, we are celebrating our anniversary at Ice House. We have a performance art series. It's called the Urgent Emergent Performance Art Series. Each month is curated to a specific theme,
Uh-huh.
and they have been so good. Oh, they've been so good and so fun. Yeah, so every third weekend of the month, just like come out to Ice House and hang out with TruArtSpeaks.
What are the April and May and like the upcoming themes?
April it's Poetry Month. It's National Poetry Month. So this month is the Poet Circle. We have a live band, a DJ, and like just this phenomenal list of Minnesota poets who are going to be rocking the mic. Some with the band, some without the band, and the whole thing. Um, Also, so many of the folks on the bill are also Aries, so
Love.
we're gonna have a blast.
I love it.
Um,
My sister is my best friend and she's an Aries, so I love
yes,
Aries. I
let's
love
go.
Aries.
Let's go. And May is the theme is movement music.
Okay,
So it's really gonna
cool.
be like, very social justice based musicians and artists from the Twin Cities, like the folk who who are at the protests, at the rallies, or who have been historically, and it's that kind of vibration.
I love that. Cool. I might have to come check that out. I'm gonna
Please
have to
do.
come check that out. And where can our listeners find you, Tish Jones?
Yo, my website is where all the things Tish Jones happen. So it's just tishjonespoet.com. Also online, I think it's either Tish Jones or I think it's the Tish Jones online or Tish Jones Poet. I don't really know. I think it's the Tish Jones on social media. But True Art Speaks, www.truartspeaks.org. No E in the word true, so TruArtspeaks. Same on all socials, TruArtspeaks. We are outside.
Awesome. And congratulations again on the 20 years of True Art Speaks.
Thank you.
Congratulations on you because you're amazing. It was so great
Thank
to
you.
hear your story. And thanks for joining. And to all of our listeners, keep creating, keep making magic. And as always, remember your art is a gift to you and the world. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Art is the New Wall Street. If you liked what you heard today, give our show a follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find us on social media or at artistthenewwallstreet.com. Keep creating, and we'll see you next time.